Brad Pitt, George Clooney, Fix-It Partners. Here's my review of Wolves. Margaret, played by Amy Ryan, is a high-profile district attorney, and one night she attends a party in town, and then afterwards she goes to her favorite bar, which is in a hotel nearby. In the bar, she meets a young man only referred to in this film as the Kid, played by Austin Abrams. They talk to each other, they take a liking to each other, and Margaret books a room in the hotel and she invites him back to her hotel room. The Kid is jumping up and down on the bed in the hotel room because he's high on drugs, and suddenly he falls off the bed and has an accident and he dies in the hotel room. Margaret panics and calls a phone number that she's been given to if anything ever bad like this happens. She's been told to call this number and they can fix the situation for her. After calling the number, George Clooney knocks on the hotel room door and comes into the room. George and Brad Pitt don't have names in this film, so I'll just refer to them as George and Brad. Apparently, George is the best fixer-upper in town. Margaret explains the situation to George, and George checks the pulse on the young man to see if he's still alive, and George asks Margaret several questions about the situation and about her life just to come up to speed. And then suddenly, while they're talking, there's a knock on the hotel room door. At the door opens, Brad walks in, and Brad explains that there's a hidden camera in the room, and he's been sent by the hotel owner / hotel manager to fix this situation because the hotel doesn't want any bad news in the press. Margaret is told to forget about this situation and go back home and pretend like nothing ever happened. And so that's the last time we see her. And Brad and George are cleaning up the mess in the hotel room when Brad discovers a suitcase hidden behind a sofa bed, and inside the suitcase is a backpack full of drugs, a large amount of drugs. Brad calls his hotel manager boss to explain the situation, and she orders them to return the drugs, find out where they come from, and return the drugs to their original owner. George is obliged to help because he's captured on the hotel room cameras, and he eventually wants to destroy these camera footage and erase any evidence of him being in that hotel room. While disposing of the body and taking the body down to the parking lot, the trunk of the car opens and suddenly the young man is alive. Apparently, the young man took so many drugs, he didn't have a pulse, and it just seemed like he was dead, but actually he's still alive. George and Brad decide to drive to an acquaintance they both know, June, played by Poorna Jagannathan. When Brad, George, and the kid are all upstairs in June's apartment, eventually the kid wakes up again from his drugs and he runs out of the apartment and he escapes. And Brad and George run after him all over town, all through empty shopping centers and subways and everywhere. And eventually they capture him and they take him to a seedy pay by the hour hotel. The kid confesses that where he got the drugs from, they're from some Albanian crime family. So eventually at the end, there's a few scenes with some Albanian criminals, and eventually we end up at the end of the movie at a dock where they can drop off the drugs, and there's some shootout with some Albanian criminals, and eventually Brad, George, and the kid escape alive. There's a final scene set at a diner cafe where Brad and George are sitting across from each other and they're talking about the situation that happened last night, and they're trying to connect the dots, and they come to the conclusion that both them, Brad and George, were being hunted by their bosses to be killed, and that's the end of the film. It's assumed that there's going to be like a final shootout at the cafe, but we just get it at the end, and we don't actually see them escape, and we don't actually see the shootout. Wolves is directed by Jon Watts, who has directed films such as the 2015 film Cop Car with Kevin Bacon and the 3 Tom Holland Spider-Man films. Wolves basically tries to completely survive off the charm and the charisma of Brad Pitt and George Clooney, but unfortunately it's just not enough. For the majority of the film, George and Brad just childly tease each other about who's the best fixer and who has the best methods and who's younger and who's older. And it's basically just a one joke film where the one joke is not even funny. It just gets repetitive and old very quickly. The film just feels so flat and lifeless. The dialogue is not witty or funny, and when we're finally outside the confines of the hotel room, when we're finally out in the city, it's just so lifeless. There's no people, no cars, there's no interactions with anybody. It's almost as if they were trying to save money or something. It's almost as if they gave the whole casting budget to just George and Brad because there was an opportunity to create some zany, entertaining side characters in this film, but Poorna Jagannathan as June is given nothing to do. And Austin Abrams, the kid character, he just comes off as annoying. There's even a scene at the end where actor Richard Kind plays the kid's father, but he's just given like a 5-second cameo, so it's almost as if his scenes were deleted, or what's the point of having him in the film? He was just completely wasted. The tone of the film is very light. If you're after a realistic crime drama, then you're not going to get it here. Brad and George make so many mistakes in the film that it's very difficult to take the story seriously. My only positive about the film is that Brad and George, their star presence does carry the film a lot. My favorite scene in the film is where Brad and George are at an abandoned wedding and they are forced to join into the dancing, and they have to pretend they don't know each other and have to pretend that they don't like each other. And that's definitely, it's a very well staged scene, and it's definitely my favorite scene in the film. I give Wolves 2 stars out of 5. Brad Pitt and George Clooney's presence just isn't enough to carry this film. It's lifeless, it's unoriginal, it has no entertaining side characters. It's very dull. I would strongly recommend you go back and watch the Oceans 11, 12, 13 movies instead of watching this movie Wolves. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel and like the video. See you next time. Bye.